I am getting tired of doing this. He is really heavy.
So as you all know by now, the third season of Rezero is one of the two anime everyone cares about right now.
That anime snob has run out of things to bitch about once again and had no better idea than to start crying about Rezero again after almost 4 years. This man is clearly the biggest Rezero fan in secret, and I mean that both metaphorically and literally. The reason is obvious: his deluded followers have to watch someone else ranting about anime and things that they dislike. Otherwise, how would these grown-ass men vent out their frustrations about their daily life? Mind you, inside of that group of people, there is a subset of individuals that not only suffer from severe frustration but also suffer from something that is called nostalgia delusion, most commonly known as elitismus retardedus, which is a mental illness that commonly affects to men in their 30s that get absolutely zero contact with the outside world.
Since whatever I say about it will magically be deemed as hating it for the sake of hating it.
How strange, how could people deem you as a hate watcher? That is absolutely not the case. You are obviously being critical about the media you consume. More precisely, you are being critically butthurt about the media you consume.
I will instead show you what the fandom thinks about it.
I hope this absolutely intellectually honest review of what the fandom thinks about the series is not full of hand-wave dismissals, cherry-picking, strawmans, lazy critiques, and favoritism towards the side that criticizes it. Oh.
Let's go over the reviews on Mal, and to be fair, I will show you both the negatives and the positives, and then you will be free to figure out the consensus.
There ain't no way that this man is trying to figure out what the community thinks while simultaneously resorting to MAL to figure this out. MAL is the home for the laziest and most pseudo-elitist anime watchers to ever step foot into this planet. I mean, do I even have to give examples of this being actually the case? Moreover, if you want to see videos of what the fandom thinks about it, why do you not watch their analysis of the episodes of the series and their video essays about it? Did you not realize that MAL is not the place to be looking for genuine criticism about any form of media? You are making your confirmation bias far too obvious.
Let's start with the negative one. He says the dialogue is cringe and very anime-like.
Huh? Oh no, the dialogue is anime-like in an anime? Stop the presses. Someone call the industry, they've been making anime too anime-like. How dare the characters in a Rezero fantasy world, with witches, oni, and talking cats, not speak like extras in a Netflix drama? Next thing you'll tell me is that shonen anime is too shonen-like because people shout their attack names. But let's get serious for a moment. Anime-like is such a lazy critique. It's just vague enough to sound like a point, while being too ambiguous to refute properly. Are you mad about exaggerated expressions, unique character quirks, or the fact that Subaru occasionally breaks the tension with humor? If you want absolute realism, like an average Joe having breakfast and going out in his Ford Ranger to visit his farm, go watch a documentary. Otherwise, you're just whining about a style you clearly don't enjoy.
It doesn't feel natural at all.
Who's to say what natural even means here? Should Subaru stop mid-conversation to complain about taxes or gas prices? This isn't Breaking Bad. It's a high-stakes fantasy series, and the dialogue reflects that. These criticisms are the laziest thing that you could have ever found there. But sure, let's pretend MAL is full of dialogue experts who would definitely know how Subaru should sound after reliving his own death 3 times. Spoiler, they wouldn't.
Along with it, there is a lot of dead time, the direction is bad, and the animation is limited. All of these remarks are about the anime.
First of all, dead time is not the insult you think it is. Rezero uses its slower moments to build tension, develop its characters, and let the emotional weight of Subaru's experiences sink in. I mean, that is precisely why half of Season 2 is mainly composed of build-up and the other part is primarily payoff. Furthermore, that is what makes Rezero itself a good series, the amount of build-up that you have before the final delivery, on top of insanely well-written characters and absurdly big lore. Brother, you even have a freaking psychologist reacting to Rezero and analyzing it, and, not only that, but he is giving psychology classes using the series itself. You are way out of your depth here. If you're bored, that says more about your inability to appreciate subtlety than it does about the anime. Not everything needs to be a flashy shonen fight every 5 minutes. Putting that aside, these phrases are essentially a cop-out for people who can't articulate why they didn't like what they saw. What exactly makes the direction bad? Did the camera angles offend you? Was there a lack of explosions every 3 seconds? Or maybe the scenes weren't spoon-feeding you with enough flashing neon lights to keep your attention? And limited animation? Be specific. Are you talking about frame rate? Art consistency? Or are you just upset it didn't look like a ufotable AMV on steroids? This isn't even criticism, it's just parroting vague buzzwords to sound authoritative. If you're going to critique animation or direction, at least try to provide concrete examples instead of throwing around generic complaints like confetti.
Now let's see the positive one. It's nothing but a guy vlogging about his feels when he watched the first episode. He doesn't say anything about the actual show. It's just vapid reactionary words about his emotions. You have no idea what he's talking about because none of it is about the show.
Hold up. So you're mad that this positive review is vlogging about emotions and not diving into the intricacies of the anime, but weren't you just praising a negative review earlier that did the exact same thing? The negative review boiled down to the dialogue feels cringe and the animation is bad, which is just as subjective and emotionally driven as this guy saying, I was shocked and enjoyed every minute. The contradiction is glaring. Apparently, vapid reactionary words about emotions are fine when they align with your opinion, but the moment someone expresses genuine enthusiasm, it's suddenly invalid? Little that anime slop, you can't have it both ways. If the negative review counts as actual criticism, then by that same logic, this one also qualifies as a review. Now, let's compare the two reviews for a second, shall we? The negative review you so graciously highlighted was just a collection of vague, unsupported claims. The direction is bad, the animation is limited. No examples, no analysis, just buzzwords thrown around to sound smart. Meanwhile, this positive review, despite its typos and chaotic phrasing, at least tells us what the viewer liked. They mention the pacing, the action, the plot, and how the episode exceeded their expectations as it progressed. That's already more substance than the animation is limited. In fact, this review even points out specific elements like the hour-and-a-half runtime of the first episode, how it builds momentum, and their favorite aspects of the series. Sure, it's rough around the edges, but at least they're sharing genuine thoughts instead of copy-pasting MAL buzzwords and calling it a day. You also said that we had no idea what was talking about because none of it was about the show, which is funny, because your exact criticisms for saying that apply to the other negative review that you brought up. Get wrecked, snob. Furthermore, I think we know exactly what he's talking about. He's sharing his excitement and personal experience with the episode. What he doesn't do is hide behind pretentious language or vague critiques. So if you're upset about this guy expressing his emotions, maybe reflect on why you had no issue with the negative review doing the same thing, only less coherently.
The second negative points out a really awful Sword Art Online type of abduction that took place in it. A one-dimensional rapist who wants to marry and have sex with a comatose virgin girl, and he treats her as a sex toy.
A Sword Art Online type of abduction? Really? Is this the only comparison your brain can conjure up for literally any villain who does something morally reprehensible? You hear abduction and immediately go, oh, this must be SAO. Groundbreaking insight. I bet if you saw The Godfather, you'd call it a rip-off of Narcos because both involve crime. It's lazy shorthand like this that screams, I don't actually have a point, but I still want to sound smart. And calling Regulus a one-dimensional rapist? That's not even a critique, it's a buzzword salad. What makes him one-dimensional, exactly? Do you think slapping the word rapist on a villain automatically makes them shallow, or are you just hoping no one will notice you didn't bother explaining? At least try to elaborate instead of dropping empty labels and hoping they stick. And the comatose virgin girl bit is just low-effort rage bait. If you're going to argue something, argue it, don't just throw in inflammatory terms to rile up your audience. This isn't a critique. It's a tantrum in disguise. Let's actually analyze the characters instead of crying about them. Regulus isn't just evil for the sake of it, his entire character is a twisted exploration of greed. He doesn't crave wealth or power, he craves control. Everything in his life exists to serve his ego, and he justifies every horrible act with the belief that he's entitled to it. This man doesn't even see people as people, they're objects to him, extensions of his warped sense of perfection. His endless monologues about order and justice aren't random, they reveal how completely detached he is from reality, which makes him terrifying. If you missed all of that, at this point you're just blatantly stupid. And Amelia is literally resisting Regulus during this entire ordeal. Even when faced with an unwinnable situation, she doesn't break, she remains defiant, refusing to let him control her. If you think that's passive, then you've clearly misunderstood what's happening. Amelia's entire character arc revolves around her growth from someone who doubted herself to someone who stands her ground, no matter how impossible the odds. But of course, none of this
There is also a mention of the large number of minor characters that nobody can care about, because they hardly got any screen time or matter in the long run.
Oh no, a series has minor characters. How dare it attempt world building or establish a conflict with more than 3 speaking roles? Imagine unironically whining that a large-scale conflict, complete with factions, alliances, and ideological clashes, has a big cast. What's next? Are you going to complain that the show has too much world building, or that the plot requires more than 5 minutes of focus to follow? Honestly, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised. And nobody can care about them? Who exactly is nobody here? His echo chamber of MAL comments? Speak for yourself. If you can't follow the narrative threads, that's a you problem. There's a difference between minor characters being underdeveloped and you simply not paying attention.
This review is about the show, and clearly lets you know what doesn't work.
Does it really, though? All this review tells us is that someone got mad because they couldn't process more than one storyline at a time. If your idea of clear critique involves vague buzzwords, surface-level comparisons, and whining that the show dared to have complexity, then maybe it's time to take a step back and re-evaluate what actual criticism looks like. Everything you complained about in the first positive review is all here. Vague, emotion-driven descriptions? Check. A complete lack of analysis? Check. Reactionary rambling with no structure? Double check. Yet somehow, this review gets a free pass because it aligns with your bias. Do you even hear yourself? Your standards are as consistent as your video schedule, which is to say, not at all.
The second positive is not about the show. It's once again someone vlogging about how Rezero changed his life. He's not helping you understand a thing about it. It's all about him, writing a diary that matters only to him.
Slop, are you even listening to yourself? This review is clearly about the show. It talks about themes, character development, and how the story impacted the reviewer on an emotional level. Yes, it's personal, because art affects people personally, but that doesn't mean it's just a diary. You're acting like any discussion of how the series resonated with someone automatically invalidates their opinion, which is precisely what you were praising in the previous negative critiques, you absolute buffoon. The review explicitly mentioned Subaru and Emilia's arcs, praising how they've evolved since the beginning. It highlights key developments, like Emilia's trials and Subaru's struggles with his double-edged ability, and discusses how the themes of hardship and growth resonate both within the story and in real life. But no, let's ignore all that because it's easier for you to dismiss it as rant than actually engage with what's being said. Here's where your hypocrisy shines, snob. You claim this review isn't helpful or insightful, but let's compare it to the negative reviews you've been praising. The first negative review was nothing but vague gripes about cringe dialogue and bad direction without a single concrete example. The second negative review went on about a one-dimensional rapist while completely misunderstanding Regulus's character. And now, you're praising a third negative review filled with accusations of lawless and imaginary harems. Those reviews are shallow and incoherent, yet they somehow meet your standard for real critique. Meanwhile, this positive review actually references specific aspects of the story, the trials, character growth, thematic depth, and even the music. But because it's positive, you dismiss it outright. The double standard is ridiculous. If this reviewer wrote the same thing but replaced their praise with complaints, you'd be singing their praises instead of calling it a diary. And let's not forget how you've twisted the narrative here. Just because the reviewer mentions how the series helped them personally doesn't mean they're not talking about the show. They're discussing how Rezero's themes of resilience, sacrifice, and long-term growth inspired them to reflect on their own life. That's not a weakness of the review, that's what makes art meaningful. You might not get it because you're too busy pretending your personal grudges are objective critiques, but for the rest of us, connecting with art is a feature, not a flaw. This review has everything you claim you want, references to character development, story progression, and thematic resonance. But you don't care about any of that because it doesn't fit your narrative. At this point, it's obvious that your critique isn't about Rezero or even its fans. It's about feeding your echo chamber and stroking your own ego. Congratulations, snob, you've officially devolved into the very thing you claim to hate, someone ranting without substance.
The third negative review points once again the huge number of lolis that are now part of Subaru's harem, how even Emilia is now talking like a virtual waifu, and how the rushed character introductions make it hard for you to care about any of them. It's a review that clearly tells you the problems with the show.
Huh?
Find the person who made this review and make him undergo an IQ test. There are high chances that the IQ test sheet will refuse to be written on provided how absolutely stupid this person is. There are exactly 3 characters in Arc 5 who could reasonably be called Lolis, Beatrice, Mimi, and maybe Liliana Masquerade. Let's look at each one. Beatrice is Subaru's contracted spirit, Mimi is a quirky but harmless member of Anastasia's camp, and Liliana is just a bard who doesn't even interact with Subaru enough to develop anything resembling affection for him. None of these characters have any romantic interest in Subaru, nor are they treated as part of a harem. Your argument isn't just wrong, it's delusional. And if you think Capella is a lowly, I'm going to have to ask what show you're watching. Capella is a shape-shifting monster whose entire character is about embodying depravity and chaos. She doesn't even have a consistent form, let alone qualify as a lowly. If you're looking at her and coming to that conclusion, it says a lot more about you than it does about the series. Seek help. But wait, it gets even worse. If you're counting Felt or Anastasia as lowless, literal teenage girls with fully developed personalities and goals, you clearly have no idea what the word even means, which is why I said he is absurdly stupid. And his other points are even dumber. Subaru doesn't have a harem in any way, shape or form. There are only 3 people in this world that actually love Subaru. One is a crazy Yandra, the other one is his actual partner, Emily, and the other one is in a coma. Seriously, who is the brain-dead idiot spreading this stupid takes, because most salty haters copy-paste this trash criticism non-stop. Furthermore, let's analyze the situation in regards to the lowless. Beatrice is like family to him, Mimi barely interacts with him outside of her quirky antics, and Liliana is focused on her music and nothing else. If you see all of this and think, harem, you're just projecting your own misconceptions onto the series. And Amelia, talking like a virtual waifu? Please. That's not a critique, that's just buzzword salad. Amelia is still the same flawed, insecure, and determined character she's always been. If anything, Arc 5 shows her growing more confident and assertive. But sure, let's ignore all of that because it's easier to pretend she's some hollow trope than actually engage with her development. I mean, after all, these people are ranting, they are not making honest criticisms. Finally, let's revisit your hypocrisy. You're defending this review for, clearly telling us the problems with the show, but what does it actually say? Vague accusations about lowless, a completely imaginary harem, and buzzwords about character introductions being rushed. None of this is insightful, it's the same lazy nonsense you criticized in the positive reviews. The only difference? This one aligns with your bias, so you're willing to bend over backwards to justify it. At this point, it's obvious that you don't care about consistency or substance. You just want to hate Rezero, and you'll latch onto anything that lets you do so, no matter how stupid it makes you look.
The third negative only talks about superficial things like Subaru is suffering, the voice acting is good, it looks pretty, and has nice sounds. At least this one is about the show.
Snob, let's cut the nonsense. Are you actually reading the review or just cherry-picking words to fit your narrative? You claim this review doesn't give a shit about plot or characters, but the very first thing it mentions is Subaru's suffering and how the stakes are raised in the opening episodes. That's a direct reference to the plot and the emotional weight of the characters. But no, apparently none of that matters because they also dared to praise the visuals. By your logic, if someone appreciates the technical aspects of an anime, they're automatically shallow. Brilliant, and let's not gloss over how laughably vague your dismissal is. Superficial things? What does that even mean? Visuals, voice acting, and music are core components of any anime. Are we supposed to pretend they don't exist just because they don't fit your anti-Rezero agenda? This review ties these elements back to the story's tension and emotional stakes, something you conveniently ignore because it makes your argument look even weaker.
This reviewer though doesn't give a shit about plot or characters.
Says the guy who praised negative reviews that didn't even mention plot or characters. Let's not forget the first negative review you defended, which was nothing more than, the dialogue is cringe and the direction is bad. Or the second negative review that completely misrepresented Regulus and reduced him to a one-dimensional rapist. Those reviews had no meaningful engagement with the story, yet you held them up as examples of real critique. Hypocrisy much? Here's the truth, this positive review actually addresses more of the show than your favorite negative ones ever did. It talks about Subaru's suffering, the stakes, and even the pacing of the first episodes. If that doesn't count as caring about plot and characters, then I don't know what does. But hey, keep moving the goalposts to justify your bias, it's about the only thing you're good at.
As long as he gets colores bonitos, then he is pleased.
Your strawman is lame, saying, if you like the visuals, you're shallow, is absolutely brain dead. Snob, this is just lazy. The review doesn't praise the visuals in isolation, it connects them to the story's impact. It points out how the animation and voice acting elevate the tension and emotional weight of Subaru's journey. But sure, let's ignore all of that because acknowledging nuance might strain your brain. And can we talk about how you keep praising negative reviews that don't even try to analyze the visuals, music, or voice acting? You'll dismiss this review for caring about those elements but give a free pass to reviewers who couldn't be bothered to engage with anything beyond, I didn't like it. At this point, your standards aren't just inconsistent, they're non-existent.
The fourth negative is someone pointing out why he's fed up with the series. It's a lolly harem about a neat otaku who never changes clothes. He doesn't care about anything and feels like he wasted his time. It's almost like a vlog, but it still tells you why he didn't like it by mentioning things about the show.
Snob, are you hearing yourself? You're really going to sit there and claim this review clearly cares about plot and characters when it literally says, I forgot the plot because I never cared? Are you just allergic to logic, or is this some kind of advanced self-parody? This review does nothing but whine about unrelated nonsense like Subaru's clothes and vaguely insult the cast and visuals without offering a single specific critique. If that's your standard for real analysis, then congratulations, you've officially bottomed out. Let's hear some parts of his criticisms against Rezero. He first said, I sighed when I saw the lowly harem. Again with the lowly harem nonsense. At this point, they've latched onto this phrase so hard I'm starting to think they're projecting. We already debunked this ridiculous claim in the last section. There are exactly 3 characters in Arc 5 who could remotely fit the lowly archetype, Beatrice, Mimi, and maybe Liliana, and none of them are romantically interested in Subaru. The fact that this reviewer repeats this tired, baseless talking point just shows how little effort they put into engaging with the series. And you, snob, are eating it up like it's gospel. It's pathetic. He also said, I sighed when I saw that Subaru still hasn't changed clothes. The great critique of modern storytelling. Why hasn't the main character changed his outfit? I can't believe we're even addressing this, but since you've decided this is a valid complaint, let's break it down. Subaru's outfit is a reflection of his status. He's an outsider in a world he doesn't fully belong to, and his tracksuit symbolizes that. It's a deliberate choice that underscores his struggle to adapt. But sure, let's reduce it to, he never changes clothes, because engaging with the actual plot instead of critiquing the main character for not changing clothes is far easier. Finally he said, the characters are bland and uninteresting, the visuals are bland and uninteresting. Music and animation were alright. I forgot the plot because I never cared, and I never cared because the cast never seemed sympathetic. This might be the most hollow critique I've ever seen. The characters are bland. Okay, why? Which characters? What about them didn't work for you? If you can't even name specifics, then you're not critiquing, you're just whining. And I forgot the plot because I never cared? How is that a valid point? You're essentially admitting you didn't pay attention, and yet Snob is here acting like this review is some masterpiece of analysis. At least try to sound like you watched the show before writing a review.
And he clearly cares about plot and characters, not pretty colors and nice sounds like the previous one.
Snob, this is pure delusion. The review doesn't care about plot and characters. It outright says the reviewer forgot the plot and never cared about the cast. That's the exact opposite of caring about plot and characters. Meanwhile, the pretty colors and nice sounds review you mocked earlier actually addressed the plot, pacing, and emotional stakes. But because it was positive, you dismissed it, and now you're bending over backwards to defend this empty drivel. The hypocrisy is so blatant it's almost funny. Snob, you're not looking for critique. You're looking for negativity, no matter how shallow or baseless it is, to prop up your narrative. This review is the definition of surface-level whining, yet you're championing it as a legitimate critique. If this is your gold standard for analysis, then it's no wonder your entire video is such a disaster.
The fourth positive finds it funny that Rem is in coma. He laughs with Subaru's suffering. He likes how the animation style changed to look like a hentai because it's pleasing to the eye. This one only cares about enjoyment, even if said enjoyment comes down to laughing at people suffering and jerking off to animated titties.
You really outdid yourself here. Did you even read this review, or did you just skim it for the weirdest phrases and build your argument from there? You're seriously trying to frame this reviewer as someone who laughs at people suffering and jerks off to animated titties. I mean, are you even listening to yourself? Calling this critique absurd is putting it lightly. You've managed to make the review sound more insane than it actually is, and that's saying something. Let's start with your wild claims. First, the reviewer makes a dark joke about Rem's coma and her voice actor being listed as not applicable. Is it awkward? Sure. But you're acting like this is some kind of villainous celebration of her suffering. Do you even know how to interpret humor? Or is context just a foreign concept to you? Oh, forgot you have zero friends, Snob. Then there's your hentai fixation. The reviewer notes that some polished scenes feel exaggerated and out of place. Sure, they phrased it poorly, but they're not sitting there drooling over fan service. You, on the other hand, jump straight to jerking off to animated titties. That says way more about you than it does about the reviewer. Congratulations, Snob, you've turned misinterpreting things on purpose into an art form. And the best part? You're mad because the reviewer enjoyed the show. Imagine being so pretentious that you see someone finding entertainment in anime and think, oh no, that's invalid. Snob, it's okay to admit you don't understand how emotions work. Anime is supposed to entertain, it's not a secret. Acting like enjoyment is some kind of crime is peak irony, especially coming from someone whose entire video is built around salty rants. Here's the thing, this review actually touches on way more aspects of the show than the negative ones you've been praising. It discusses the voice acting, the shifts in animation style, and how the production team adapted the source material. Is it messy? Absolutely. But at least it's trying. Compare that to your beloved negative reviews, which include gems like "Subaru hasn't changed clothes," and "I forgot the plot because I never cared." But no, this one's the problem, right? Your double standard is so blatant it's hilarious. Snob, you're not critiquing anything here, you're just twisting the review into whatever fits your narrative. At this point, the only thing this video proves is that you're running out of ways to hate Rezero. But hey, I'll give you this, you're almost as entertaining as the show itself.
The fifth negative has a very detailed bullet point format that explains why the show became immature. Everything he wrote is about things that are bad about the show.
Snob, are you serious? You're holding this up as a very detailed critique? This review is a mess of bullet points that sound like they were written by someone who was half asleep and angry at the world. And not pretend this incoherent rant is some grand manifesto on the downfall of Rezero. It's like reading the notes of someone who skimmed the anime, didn't understand a thing, and decided to turn their confusion into criticism. First, let's laugh at your claim that everything he wrote is about things that are bad about the show. No, Snob, everything he wrote is about his subjective annoyances. The bullet points jump from "Subaru spams cool words" to "too much emphasis on women and Lolas" to "the director gave purple-haired characters more eyelashes." Really, eyelashes are now a sign of bad direction? This isn't criticism, it's an unfiltered tantrum. Then there's the "immature Power Rangers" comparison. Snob, this alone should have clued you in that the reviewer wasn't engaging with the material seriously. Comparing Rezero's faction-driven conflict, morally complex characters, and layered world building to Power Rangers is like calling Game of Thrones a knockoff of Dora the Explorer. It's so absurd that even you should have caught it. And let's not forget how this review contradicts itself constantly. It claims the show is catering to children while simultaneously complaining about romance, fan service, and harems, things that don't exactly scream targeted at kids. But hey, Snob, as long as it's negative, you'll lap it up and call it detailed, right? Consistency clearly isn't your strong suit. You are getting bodied here, Snob.
And finally, the fifth positive is someone not saying a thing about the show. He's just hyping it with buzzwords such as "absolute cinema" and then shoehorns his YouTube channel so he can sell you merchandise. That's the fakest type of non-review you can find, because it's just someone making excuses for exploiting and profiting out of people's addiction to animated titties.
Snob, let me get this straight. You're accusing someone else of using buzzwords, shoehorning their YouTube channel, and profiting off people's engagement with anime? That's rich coming from the guy whose entire career is built on exploiting salty anime fans who want someone to validate their bitterness. You've literally been making the same video for years, cherry-picking reviews, whining about how modern anime sucks, and pretending it's some kind of intellectual critique. But sure, let's talk about this reviewer being fake. You pretend to be some arbiter of real critique while doing exactly what you accuse this reviewer of, pandering to an audience that they're hyping up a show they enjoy, while you're milking negativity for clicks and pretending it's intellectual analysis. You're not fooling anyone, matter of fact, this is severe projection, lil bro. And let's not overlook the irony of you calling this a non-review. Snob, you literally just spent several minutes praising reviews that said things like "Subaru hasn't changed clothes," and "I forgot the plot because I never cared." But this review, which actually discusses the premiere's tension, characters, and psychological focus, is somehow worse. Your standards don't exist. The only thing you care about is whether a review agrees with your bias. Finally, let's address your pro-clutching over the YouTube plug. Are you really acting like this is some kind of moral failing? You're sitting here profiting off a video designed to fuel outrage and cynicism, but someone else promoting their content is where you draw the line? Come on, Snob, if there's anyone exploiting an audience here, it's you. You're the one profiting off bitter, deluded fans who can't enjoy anime without someone holding their hand and telling them it's okay to hate everything. This reviewer might be hyping the show, but at least they're not pandering to misery for clicks. That's your thing. Honestly, Snob, your hypocrisy is almost impressive. You accuse this reviewer of being fake, but the only thing fake here is your pretense of objectivity. This isn't critique, it's a tantrum dressed up as analysis. Keep going, Snob. The only thing you're proving is how little you actually understand the medium you claim to critique.
And there you have it. Now you have an objective view of what the community thinks about the show. I didn't say these things, everyone else said these things.
Objective? Snob, this is the most transparent attempt at bias dressed as objectivity I've ever seen. You cherry-picked a handful of reviews that align with your hate-watching agenda, ignored anything remotely positive, and then declared it what the community thinks. This was not some balanced look at public opinion. It's a clown show designed to validate your fragile ego. You didn't present the community's thoughts, you scraped the bottom of the barrel to find garbage that matched your narrative and then called it facts. Matter of fact, Why did you not point out that there are negative reviews that were written using AI? Oh. I forgot. That's because it completely destroys your narrative.
Therefore, you have to accept them as facts. Rezero is a lolly harem with cringy hentai dialogue and a lot of characters you can't care about.
Accept them as facts. What facts, snob? The incoherent ranting of a few random reviewers who can't even agree on their complaints? One of your reviews whined about Subaru's tracksuit, another admitted they didn't care about the plot, and yet another complained about eyelashes. Eyelashes, snob. And somehow, you managed to piece all this nonsense together into lowly harems and hentai dialogue. If this is your idea of facts, I'm starting to see why you've been stuck making the same 5 videos for years. And about that lowly harem, we've debunked this already, but apparently, you're so desperate to hammer it home that I'll say it again. There is no harem, and there are no lolas romantically involved with Subaru. This isn't a critique, it's you spamming a buzzword because you know it gets your audience frothing at the mouth. You don't care about being accurate. You care about getting your next batch of clicks from bitter anime fans who can't think for themselves.
But it doesn't matter if it looks pretty, it's fun to see Subaru suffering, and you subscribe to YouTube channels so they can sell you rem dakimakuras.
Snob, the sheer hypocrisy here is staggering. You're accusing someone else of pandering to fans and profiting off them while your entire platform exists to exploit people who want to vent about anime. You've built your brand on whining and negativity, and now you have the audacity to criticize someone else for hyping up a show they actually enjoy? At least those people are celebrating something. You're just rolling around in the same pit of misery and calling it critique. And let's talk about the Dakimakura comment. That's your big closer? A tired, irrelevant joke about anime merch? It doesn't even make sense. You're throwing it in because you've run out of actual arguments, and you're hoping nobody notices. But we do notice, snob. It's lazy, it's predictable, and it's yet another example of how desperate you are to fill time in this video. This video isn't about the community's opinions. It's about your opinions, repackaged to look like consensus. You cherry-picked nonsense, twisted it into something it's not, and slapped objective on the front like anyone's going to buy it. You're not exposing Rezero. You're exposing yourself as someone who can't engage with media honestly because you're too busy trying to feed your echo chamber. Face it, snob, you're not a critic. You're a caricature of one.